Hi, my name is Jennifer Pintar. This is the night logo shot, and we are doing an actual video interview for Lone Star. Everyone needs to remember to always wear their safety gloves, especially when handling tungsten lights. Several reasons this is important. 1, bulbs get extremely hot, and 2, the oil on your hands can damage the bulbs, which can then ruin them or cause them to explode. Beware of any gels, diffusions, or flags, as the bulbs can catch things on fire. Watch out for trip hazards, especially with stringers on the ground, and if on a ladder, make sure you have 3 points of contact. We are in a public location, so be aware of other people and stay out of the line of fire. The lighting setup consists of 3 LEDs, a key light, a fill light, and a background light. We will use a gold reflector with the fill. There will be 3 tungsten backlights as well. 2 of them will be highlighting the brick columns to the left of the set, and 1 highlighting the white back wall within the front logo. All tungsten lights will have gels added for diffusion. We start by prepping the location and taking multiple pictures of the room. Since we are moving furnitures and decorations, we need to make sure we put everything back in place exactly as it was. Next, we stage the equipment and get the camera and monitor set up. The camera settings are 24 frames rate, shutter speed 50, aperture 3.2, and ISO 500. We set up a total of 3 LEDs on stands with sandbags. The key light is at a 45-degree angle and hits the right side of the subject's face. Temperature setting is 5600 and dim to 50%. Barn doors for both lights are open. A gold reflector is placed on the left side to fill any additional unwanted shadows on the subject's face or body. The third LED is the background light and is positioned at the very back wall to the left of the Lone Star logo. It will sit on an apple box and have no diffusion. The LED will specifically highlight the Lone Star logo. Temperature setting is 5600 and dimmer is set to 100%. The backlights consist of a total of 3 tungstens. 2 of them are placed on the right side of the set and face the brick columns to the left, thus creating perspective and filling any negative space. The first tungsten closest to the subject is the Airy 150. It sits on a stand with a sandbag and has a blue gel over it for diffusion. The gel is held in place by 3 C47s. The second tungsten is the Airy 300 and sits further back from the first tungsten. It sits on a stand with sandbags and has a red gel over it for diffusion. The gel is held in place by 2 C47s. The third backlight is an Airy 650 and sits on the balcony at the back of the room. It lights the back wall and brick columns. It also sits on a stand with a sandbag and has a red gel over it for diffusion and held in place by C47s. The gold reflector is set up to the left side of the subject's face, eliminating unwanted shadows. It hangs on a C-stand with a clamp. There's also a tennis ball on the C-stand pole. All LEDs and tungstens have a dedicated stand, sandbag, and stinger. All gels are secured with C47s and barn doors on all LEDs are open. We used an apple box for 1 LED and C-stands for 2 others. My overall set includes a total of 6 lights, 1 reflector, 7 stands, 7 sandbags, 6 stingers, and 1 apple box. Other equipment consists of a sound mic with a stand and sandbag, monitor and monitor stand. Other equipment consists of a sound mic with a stand and sandbag, a monitor and a monitor stand that is set up with the camera and a camera tripod. Thanks, and that's how we did it. Oh, what was it?
Hi, my name is Hannah Grace Dewada. This is the white cyc, and this is how we did it. The first thing we did before even lighting the white cyc was that we started with a safety meeting discussing what we needed for the lighting setup. We discussed 3-point contact when using a ladder to be very cautious. And we also discussed the line of fire as well as having gloves at all times. Then we started with the setup of the Luma Pop as well, and making sure it was the same height as the actor, but also put sandbags to make sure all is secure and nothing moved. Next, what we did was that we started to light each part separately. So first, to start off, we lit the Luma Pop first, making sure the camera was there. The camera was there and there would be no wrinkles seen on camera, because we wanted to make sure that you would see all the white with that. And we made the intensity of the light or 100 with the color temperature of 5600. Next thing we did was to make sure to light up the actor. The first thing we did was set up 2 LEDs close at a 45-degree angle to make sure it lit up both sides of the face, and also adding a flag at the left LED to lessen the harshness of the light, but also to make sure the intensity was 52 with the color temperature of 5600. The next step we did, finally set up the face light to make sure there was more light to the face, and to make sure I'm motivated to illuminate. In order for it to not be too bright, we lowered the intensity to 13%, but also had the color temperature at 5600. We made sure that all the LEDs were on stands, had a sandbag to make sure all weight was distributed through and making sure nothing was going to fall, and to make sure all stingers were all out of place and plugged in correctly. After that, we made sure the camera setups were correct and adjusted the aperture to 2.8, ISO to 160, and shutter speed to 50. The only complications we had was we tried to fill the shadows with white foam core and the use of small and large reflectors that were silver or gold, which took us about 30 minutes to do, but at the end we decided to keep it with the large silver reflector. We also kept auditioning lights to see what the problem was, but overall we fixed the lights by adding a face light to give more light to the face. But that's what we did to get the white psych.
Can I try it again? Can I restart? Okay. Hi, my name's Adriana, and this is Black Infinity, and this is how we did it.
First, we cleared the studio before we started working, and after clearing the studio, we held a safety meeting. In the safety meeting, it was mentioned that we would be using tungsten lights, so the use of gloves was required, like it was mandatory. I reminded the group that the tungsten lights are very dangerous if not handled properly. Dangers included exploding bulbs, cookies, burning cookies, or anything flammable setting on fire to close proximity to the lights. Told them to watch out for fire hazards, trip hazards, and like 3 points of contact. Sandbags on all stands was required, and stingers were required. If we were using C-stands, we used tennis balls. And remember to put the weight on the longest leg. I also remember that we are using a ladder to remember the 3 points of contact. Then we moved on to the camera settings. The camera settings was 24 frames per second with a 50 shutter speed. And we had our aperture at 5.6. And our ISO was at 1600. We placed the Lumipop with the black background onto the stand kit. And the ideal placing for the Lumipop was 10 feet behind your subject and the camera 10 feet in front of your subject. But the studio wasn't big enough, so we adjusted accordingly. We started lighting separately. First, it was our key light, then our backlight. For the lights that we used, our key light was a 650 tungsten with a chimera at a 45-degree angle. And to avoid spill, we used a flag on a C-stand. So it was very important to obtain the full effect of the Black Infinity. Lastly, we used a 150-watt C-stand as a hair light at a 45-degree angle to fully separate the subject from the background. We also used a foam core on a C-stand on the other side of the 650 to fill in any shadows for a less dramatic look. The color temperature of the tungsten was 3200, and so we used our white balance on the camera at 3200, and our safety equipment included tennis balls, clamps, sandbags, stingers, and all that. And this is how we did it.
Hi, my name is Caleb, and this is how we got the Lone Star green logo sign. The focus of this setup was to be able to see the Lone Star sign while still keeping the subject in focus. First, we held a safety meeting explaining what we are doing and what we need. We discussed trip hazards, line of fire, and the use of sandbags on all stands. We then proceeded to grab our equipment. We brought enough sandbags for all stands, some C47s, a green gel, a C-stand with some regular stands, an apple box, a white flag, an LED light, and a 650-watt tungsten light with a chimera attached. Once we got the set dressed and the camera into position, we began setting up our lights. For the background light, we set up the LED on an apple box and attached a green gel to it with some C47s. We faced it toward the back wall so we could see it in the reflection of the glass behind the subject. Then, we set up the tungsten with a chimera and faced it toward the ceiling. However, this created too much light, making it harder to see the Lone Star sign outside, so we just left it off. We then attached a white flag on the C-stand and positioned it above the subject. This diffused the ceiling light, making the light softer on the subject. Lastly, we changed our camera settings to 2000 ISO, 3.2 f-stop, or aperture, and the shutter speed to 50 FPS. All right, ready?
Hey, my name is Porter Hasha, and this is how we got the neon star set up. And just for a little notice, the star just now happened to turn off at the end of our setup. Alright, so for the neon star setup, we would start out with a safety meeting to discuss line of fire, third point of contact, and any other safety issues that could arise from this. Some precautions for my setup would be tripping, running into things, and electrical shock, and burning your hands. To avoid all of these, we would need to stay vigilant and wear gloves. Before we would start, we would make sure to take pictures, and then after the meeting was done, any questions would be answered. For my camera settings, the frame rate was set at 24 and the shutter speed would be double that, so we had it set at 50. And we set the aperture at 5.6 and the ISO at 200. This gave us an equal balance of light throughout. For the lighting, we used 2 LEDs and 1 tungsten. The first LED was set up as a key light. We positioned it to the right of me, and the second smaller LED was set up as a fill light since the subject's face was a bit too contrasted. And finally, this 600 watt tungsten was set up as a background light. We decided to use the railing as a cookie, and then we put an orange gel over the tungsten to complement the blue star. For the color temperature of this look, it would be set around 4600 Kelvin. And then with all the LEDs and the daylight overhead lights, we had a cooler look than a warm, and the orange tungsten helped balance everything out. For my grips, the materials they would need for this would be the 2 LEDs, the one 600 watt tungsten, 4 stands, an apple box, 4 stingers, a camera, the monitor and the tripod, 3 sandbags, the clamps, and the grip bag. They would start off by setting up the key light, and then they positioned the key light at a 45-degree angle up and to the right of me. Next, they set up the smaller LED as a fill light. And lastly, the 600 watt tungsten was set up behind me with an orange gel. We positioned it to shine through the railing to act as a cookie. Okay.
Hi, my name is Ulises Moran Martinez, and this is the nighttime exterior shot. And I'm out here also rolling audio because I love hearing the sound of my voice. Forever and always, we started with the safety meeting. In this particular meeting, we covered the basics such as line of fire, the concern when moving equipment or yourself around others, and also equipment. Keeping an eye on trip hazards, making sure our cords had enough slack to lay flat on the ground whenever possible. In case there was a reason to place equipment higher than you could reach, we covered 3 points of contact when handling the ladder. Finally, remember taking pictures before and after of the location in order to better locate outlets and place the room back in order the way we found it. And as always, gloves were a must, despite not using any hot tungstens on this particular set. Now let's talk camera settings. Normally our frame rate would be 24, meaning our shutter speed would be 1/48, but on this particular shot our frame rate was 15 frames per second, causing our shutter speed to correlate and change in kind, thus doubling it to 1/30. Aperture was 2.8 to create our shot depth of field while still taking an appropriate amount of light to keep me looking snazzy. With that done, we adjusted our ISO to 1600 for it all to come together. We started by setting up the camera and monitor about 4 feet in front of me and then placing me in the exact spot I was to be filmed at. Later, we changed our subject from me to our amazing colleague, Towns, so I could better direct others on where and how I wanted our lights placed. We first played with the placement and intensity of our initial light before anything else. The lighting questions were all LEDs, 2 being our Icon branded LEDs, 1 which acted as our key light, being placed on a C-stand approximately 5 feet to my right diagonally and about 7 feet high, tilted at a 45-degree angle with a double silk diffuser right in front of it. Also on a C-stand about a foot to the side of our key light, but similar height-wise. After our key light was set up, we started on our backlight. Initially, we were going to use another Icon LED, but settled on our portable LED mostly the same time and have the ease of not having to run any more stingers from the outlet in the college building to our right. We placed the LED on a stand and had it diagonally about 10 feet behind me to my right. The height of the light itself was only about 6 feet high, angled slightly down towards me. This time we used a single diffusion silk that we had our guy Freddy hold in front of it to lessen the amount of overexposed light it was giving me on the cheek. Next, for an added oomph, we came back to our second Icon LED, which was set up as a dead soldier at the time, and used it to light up the trees behind me on my right. This LED was about 4 feet away from me diagonally to my left and only 5 feet high on its stand, angled straight towards the trees. All LEDs were the same 5600 color temperature in order to match the street lights in the background. Their individual intensities varied Our key light was only at 25%, our backlight was at 100%, as well as our background light. The stands had a sandbag placed on them for safety, and all cords had a stinger attached to them. Lastly, our lovely Adriana set up our C-stand about 3 feet diagonally in front of me and to my right, and clamped our boomstick to its rod and raised it a good 7 feet in the air so the mic would be right above me, but slightly directed towards my mouth in order to get a good quality of sound. Because I had been the only one to run sound in every other shot, I ran my own sound this time as well, which is why I had earphones on. With that being said, this is my night exterior shot, and this is how we achieved it. And I'm the sound man, so.
Do the whole thing?
My name is Towns Lucy. I am doing the muslin lighting setup, and this is how we did it.
So for this lighting setup, I held a safety meeting where we talked about using sandbags and tennis balls on all stands. I made sure everyone knew where the equipment was going to be set up so they would watch out for cables and stingers and lights above their heads. I also made sure everyone wore gloves while handling the tungsten lights to protect not only themselves but the lights on them as well. After we had our meeting, we set up the muslin first. The stands were set up and the poles were attached so the muslin could be secured with a few A-clamps. The muslin was bunched together to create depth and cast shadows when it was lit. The muslin was raised above my head about 6 feet behind me. For my key light, we had a 650 watt tungsten to the right of the camera with a chimera over it to give me a soft diffuse light while still having great shadows. We had a flag set up about a foot in front of the light on a C-stand, keeping the light from hitting the muslin. We used a 300 watt tungsten as a background light to light the muslin with a blue gel attached by a couple of C47s. The monitor was set to the left of the camera so we could use it to see the progress that we made, and then we had an LED as a dead soldier on the side in case we needed it. Finally, we had the 150 watt tungsten on a C-stand so we could position it behind me and light my hair for a backlight. We shot this at 24 frames per second, making the shutter speed 50, aperture 8.0, and ISO at 2500.
It was just super awkwardly set. Okay.
Hi, my name is Freddie Dominguez, and this is our slash lighting setup, and this is how we got it. We start with our safety meeting to go over what lights and equipment we'll need for this shoot and the potential hazards to come with the shoot. Once everyone is clear on what we are doing, I take a picture of the room before we start moving the desks and chairs out to reference when we bring everything back in. Once the area is clear, we start setting up the lights. The heart and soul of the slash is a 300 watt tungsten light on an apple box facing the background with the barn doors positioned in a way so that the light is narrow, making the slash effect. Then we set up our key light, which is a 600 watt tungsten with a chimera on it to soften the light up. We place the key at a 45-degree angle from me, then position a flag on a C-stand to block the light from hitting the background. We then use the 150 watt tungsten on a C-stand with 2 scrims as the backlight. Stingers are used on all lights and sandbags are on all the stands. Finally, we use a reflector to fill in some of the shadows on my face. The shutter speed is 50, the aperture is 4.5, and the ISO is 400. This is how we got it. The what? Oh, right, the clap.
My name's Cirillo Stevens, and this is the Halo lighting setup, and this is how we did it. We had a safety meeting where we discussed trips and using gloves and tennis balls on the back of C-stands. We discussed 3 points of contact on ladders, but we didn't use a ladder. We discussed trips, watching out for stingers, loose stingers on the floor, using stingers, using gloves. We used 1 stinger for each light, and we used separate outlets so we didn't overload the circuits. The frame rate is 24 frames. The ISO is 400. The aperture is 3.5. Shutter speed is 50. I use 1 tungsten 650 with a softbox on a light stand as my key light, with a flag on a C stand to block the light from hitting the wall. I use one tungsten 300 light on the light stand as my background light to make the halo. Using a blue gel, I use one tungsten 150 light on the C stand as my backlight and a gold reflector as my fill. Oh, this is...
Let's do it again.